it was a four-piece band that when it toured, each concert had different elements to it from the night before, indeed the night that was going to be in front of it. And so it was constantly changing. We had this, we had this whole, we'd built up this whole sort of elevation really to how we played, and synchronicity and connection, that to actually, once you lost one of those four members, and at the time like we did, there was no way you could bring somebody in and rehearse pieces that were from bootlegs or sound tapes or whatever, to say, well, we did it like this, like you were saying, in 1975. Can you do a bit of that along with what we did here in 1977? The whole thing would have been so disconnected.
Led Zeppelin was one of the most iconic rock bands of all time, known for their electrifying performances, groundbreaking albums, and the sheer force of their musicianship. With Robert Plant's soaring vocals, Jimmy Page's masterful guitar work, John Paul Jones's versatile musicianship, and John Bonham's thunderous drumming, the band defined an era and set the gold standard for hard rock and heavy metal. Their music was larger than life, and so was their success, but behind the scenes, tensions, excess, and tragedy loomed. By 1980, after more than a decade of domination, the unthinkable happened. Led Zeppelin broke up. The reason? A devastating loss that made it clear they could never be the same band again.
We got together so many years ago, that, and for zest and adrenaline and energy, we had the years that we had together. Yeah. And then so many years later, these people sort of sum it all up and say, okay, we remember them, which is magnificent, really.
The rise of Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin's journey began in 1968, formed by guitarist Jimmy Page, who had been a member of the Yardbirds. As the band was dissolving, Page sought to create a new group, one that would blend blues, rock, and psychedelia in a way no one had heard before. He recruited Robert Plant, a young but powerful vocalist with a striking stage presence and an otherworldly voice. Plant, in turn, suggested his friend, John Bonham, a drummer whose sheer power and precision made him a standout musician. Rounding out the lineup was John Paul Jones, a multi-instrumentalist and arranger with an encyclopedic knowledge of music theory and a deep background in studio work. The chemistry between the four was undeniable, and they quickly forged a sound that was entirely their own. In their early days, they played under the name The New Yardbirds, before adopting the moniker Led Zeppelin, a name humorously derived from a comment that their music would go down like a lead balloon. From their very first rehearsals, it was clear the band was something special. They wasted no time recording their self-titled debut album, which was released in 1969. Fueled by Page's searing guitar work, Plant's raw and emotive vocals, Jones's complex bass lines, and Bonham's thunderous drumming, the album was a powerhouse of blues-infused rock. Tracks like Dazed and Confused and Communication Breakdown showcased their ability to fuse heavy rock with blues influences, and their explosive live shows quickly earned them a dedicated following. Their rapid ascent continued with the release of Led Zeppelin II later in 1969, an album that took their sound to even greater heights. Featuring the instantly recognizable riff of Whole Lotta Love, the album was a commercial juggernaut, topping charts around the world. It also highlighted their ability to experiment with sound, incorporating layered production techniques that showcased Page's growing prowess as a producer. Each subsequent release saw the band pushing musical boundaries, incorporating folk elements in Led Zeppelin III, grand orchestral arrangements in Led Zeppelin IV, and even funk and reggae influences in Houses of the Holy.
You just have to pick up and go. And the essence of a four-piece band is four pieces. And he and I had played together since we were like 16, and it was a big hole in all our lives. And I just thought it was time to move along.
Superstardom and Excess. By the mid-1970s, Led Zeppelin had reached a level of superstardom that few bands had ever experienced. Their 1971 album, Led Zeppelin IV, became one of the best-selling albums of all time, thanks in large part to the inclusion of Stairway to Heaven, a song that would go on to define their legacy. They followed this with Houses of the Holy in '73, an album that further demonstrated their willingness to experiment with new sounds and textures. But it was their 1975 double album, Physical Graffiti, that marked the peak of their creative and commercial success. With an expansive mix of hard rock, blues, folk, and progressive influences, it was a statement of their ambition and their ability to transcend genre boundaries. Their concerts had become legendary spectacles, drawing massive crowds and breaking attendance records worldwide. They traveled on their own private jet, the Starship, and stayed in lavish hotels, living a lifestyle of excess that mirrored the decadence of the 1970s rock and roll scene. However, with great success came immense pressure, and the cracks in Led Zeppelin's foundation began to show. The relentless pace of touring, combined with increasing substance abuse, began taking a toll on the band's members. Page's use of heroin became more pronounced, affecting his performances, while Bonham's struggles with alcohol led to erratic behavior both on and off stage.
Everybody got along, didn't they? You essentially were, it was the music in the end for you guys, and that kept you together. Even though you had that car accident in Greece and had to take some time off, had to interrupt the tour.
Yeah, it was a wheelchair year.
Even more tragically, you lost your son, and you just did what any father has to do, is grapple with that loss and forget everything else.
There are priorities in life beyond being an entertainer. You know, there are a lot of things that are much more important, and we're very lucky that the gods have given us the gift to do what we do, but we do many other things, you know, and time seems to, I don't know what you think, Jim, but I think time gallops now.
Tragedy strikes. By 1977, external tragedies began to compound the band's internal struggles. That year, Robert Plant suffered an unimaginable loss when his 5-year-old son, Carrick, died suddenly from a stomach infection. The tragedy devastated Plant, and he withdrew from the band for an extended period. Led Zeppelin's future became uncertain as Plant considered leaving music altogether. But after a period of mourning, the band regrouped and began working on what would become their final studio album, In Through the Outdoor, released in 1979. The album reflected the shifting dynamics within the band, with Page increasingly consumed by drug use and Bonham battling alcohol dependency. Jones took on a more prominent role in shaping the album's sound. As a result, In Through the Outdoor leaned more heavily on keyboards and a softer approach compared to their earlier work. While the album was commercially successful, it signaled that Led Zeppelin was evolving into something different. Some critics praised its innovation, while others saw it as a departure from the band's signature heavy rock sound.
So it was kind of inevitable over the years. There's always been a kind of rub between us all, isn't there really?
The death of John Bonham. In 1980, Led Zeppelin attempted to press forward, planning a massive U.S. tour that would reaffirm their dominance. But on September 25th, tragedy struck when John Bonham was found dead at Jimmy Page's home after a day of heavy drinking. The autopsy revealed that he had choked on his own vomit, and the cause of death was ruled as pulmonary asphyxiation. The sheer amount of alcohol he had consumed, approximately 40 shots of vodka, made his passing a grim reminder of the excess that had plagued the band. Bonham's death was more than just the loss of a bandmate. It was the loss of Led Zeppelin's foundation. Without his signature drumming, the remaining members knew they could not continue. Just 2 months later, on December 4th, 1980, they released a statement announcing their official breakup. Their message was simple yet profound. We wish it to be known that the loss of our dear friend and the deep respect we have for his family, together with the sense of undivided harmony felt by ourselves and our manager, have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were.
The New York Post says Robert Plant ripped up a contract for a Led Zeppelin reunion tour. Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones had already signed on to the $800 million deal with Richard Branson, but Plant had other ideas. He stunned the billionaire by tearing the agreement to pieces right in front of the promoters. In September, we asked if he ever listens to Led Zeppelin.
Well, I'm driving usually, if it's on the car radio. That's a joke.
Reunion attempts and special performances. Although Led Zeppelin had officially disbanded, the allure of their music and demand for a reunion never faded. The first major reunion took place in 1985 at Live Aid, where Page, Plant, and Jones performed with Phil Collins and Tony Thompson on drums. But the performance was plagued by sound issues, and Page, who had been struggling with substance abuse at the time, delivered a subpar performance. It was widely considered an underwhelming attempt to recapture their former glory. They tried it again in 1988 for Atlantic Records' 40th anniversary celebration, with John Bonham's son, Jason Bonham, taking his father's place on drums. While Jason's drumming was commendable, the band lacked the chemistry and tightness of their prime. By this point, it was evident they could not simply pick up where they'd left off. The most successful and critically acclaimed reunion occurred in 2007, when they performed at the Ahmet Ertegun tribute concert at London's O2 Arena. With Jason Bonham once again behind the drum kit, the band delivered a powerful and well-rehearsed performance that reminded audiences of their legendary status. The concert was later released as Celebration Day, earning widespread praise.
Going back to the font to get some kind of massive applause, it doesn't really satisfy my need to be stimulated.
Led Zeppelin's lasting legacy. Although Led Zeppelin's time as an active band ended in 1980, their influence on rock music has never waned. Their pioneering fusion of blues, hard rock, and folk elements inspired countless bands, from the grunge movement of the 90s to modern-day rock artists. Their albums continue to sell millions of copies, and their songs remained staples of classic rock radio. For many, Led Zeppelin was more than just a rock band, they were a force of nature. Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite Led Zeppelin song? Let us know in the comments section below.